Hello, welcome or welcome back. I am Safa. Today I'm going to be doing the book recommendations tag, basically created by Steph bohrer. And so a lot of people have been doing it lately over the past few months. I'm kind of late, to be quite honest. So I decided to do it, and I have basically compiled a bunch of answers to about 15 questions to this tag that she has created. So let's just get into it. So the very first question is, name a book you tell everyone that is your favorite. There's a couple, but I think the one that I consistently say, no matter what passes by or whatever I read, it's usually Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I mean, who doesn't love this series at this point? It is so good. Also, considering they've been doing more in the Shadow and Bone Netflix series as of late, this is just perfection in a book. Kanej is top tier shipping at its best. It's just the storytelling and the heist that's just cultivated in this story, and just the background of all these characters really work, and it's just so diversely thought of, and just everything makes sense. It's just the perfect blend of a high action-packed epic fantasy mixed with a subplot of romance that isn't a huge thing, but it's like a very nice undertone of it, but has like amazing character work as well. So I highly recommend this, and it's only a duology. Now, people often notice that Six of Crows is technically the second series in Leigh Bardugo's Grishaverse world. However, you don't really need to read the first series, which is Shadow and Bone, to read this, but it is more or less recommended to. But honestly, just read this, you'll love it. Oh, another book that I absolutely love, and it's like one of my all-time favorite reads, especially from last year. I'm so glad I read it. Do I have it? Shoot, I have to grab it. 1 second. Okay, got it. So the other favorite book I have is The Blood Trader by Lynette Noni. Again, perfection in a book. Basically, if you didn't know, this is the final book in the Prison Healers series. It is YA fantasy, and it is so well done. I highly recommend reading the Prison Healers series if you love Sarah J. Maas's writing style and just the way her stories work with the subplot of romance, and it's just like the female lead and like just the dynamic characters and the intricate world and the politics involved with it. You would absolutely love this series. It just everything you want in terms of found family. There's a bit of banter. There's like a royalty ex-commoner type of relationship sort of going on here. Enemies to lovers, everything. What I love especially is just the aspect of like unlikely people kind of coming together to, complete some sort of cause and defeats an enemy of sorts. Like, that's just the whole vibe of this book. It is very much a rebellion type of story, but in the best way possible. So, one of the favorites. Okay, so the next question is basically name a book that is considered to be my guilty pleasure. I'm not ashamed of it, but it is the Selection series by Kira Cass. Listen, this book series was in its prime in the 2010 dystopian era. Although the series is called dystopian, it's not dystopian at all. Basically, if you didn't know, the Selection series is one of like the biggest booktalky type books in that era, and it revolved around this whole theme of like basically a bachelor type of story, meaning that there is this royalty like head of state basically, and the prince has to find a person to marry, and essentially he holds this competition called the Selection, in which 35 young girls kind of come into the castle and compete to be the one, basically his wife. And so it goes over a course of 3 books, but let me tell you, the angst, the romance, the tension, the drama is like top tier. I have never been so immersed and like devoured a series faster and like more intensely than I have that one. I'm gonna tell you, it's not the best written series or like books at all, but it is so entertaining, I have to say. That's why it's like my guilty pleasure, because I know it's not good, but like it's just so entertaining. Okay, question 3. Now let's name a book that everyone loved but I didn't. So there are two options for this I wanted to give. So the first one that comes to mind is Normal People by Sally Rooney. I read it, I believe, in 2020 or 2021, long time ago. But I came into the impression that Sally Rooney was a really interesting contemporary romance type of author. A lot of famous booktubers like her, like Carly, Joel, and even Jack. Those three really loved her as an author. So I was considering, like, okay, you know, they usually like some pretty good books out there. Why not give her a shot? And I did. I thought it was fine, but it wasn't anything groundbreaking. Like, I like the story, but I would never say, like, oh, I want to reread it anytime soon. Do I recommend it? I think depending on your case, depending on the trigger warnings, if you're okay with that, you know, definitely look into it. It's also adapted into a TV show, which I think is great. I heard that apparently people like the TV show better than the book, which is kind of funny. Anyway, so that's just not necessarily my cup of tea, but I'm kind of glad I read it just to say I read a Sally Rooney book. Oh, and the other book that I didn't necessarily like as much, although enjoyed a little bit, would be City of Glass by Cassandra Clare. Basically, the third book in the Mortal Instruments series, the last book in the Shadowhunters Chronicles I've read. It's been a while, I know. But I didn't enjoy it as much as the other two, which is kind of odd considering it's supposed to be the epic conclusion to the first three books, and everyone supposedly loves that one compared to the other two. I don't know. I think it was just at the time when I read it, I wasn't exactly in the best reading mood, and I was kind of in a slumpy-ish atmosphere, so it kind of hindered my likeness for the book, if that makes sense. So, although I did enjoy the overall arc of the story, it just didn't click as much as I hoped it would. Okay, question 4. A book that I read the fastest. Okay, first, obviously, it's got to be the Selection series again. Like I mentioned, I devoured that very quickly. I was the kind of person where I got the first book from the library, read it literally within, I think, a few days, just because the beginning was a little slow. But then when I finished the first book, I was like, I really need to find the second book. The problem is that I got it from my school library and my friend had the second book checked out. So I was like, I will literally go to your house to take this book and I will return it for you. Please let me read it. I was begging her and she was like, yeah, just come to my house and pick it up. I was like, sure. So I finished that in the same day. And then the next day I went back to school, read the last one. Everything was amazing. What was the other one? Ooh. Oh, I didn't pick it up. 1 second. Yes. Okay, the other one that I read the fastest is Finale. It's just the one that comes to mind first. I read this, I remember, in the summer of 2020. Yeah, and it came out like months before, so I was lucky to get it. And I just remember sitting outside of my backyard on the couch and just finishing it in literally 3.5 to 4 hours. I binged this book. It was amazing. I love Stephanie Garber's writing. If you didn't know, this is the third book in the Caraval universe, or the Caraval series, before the Once Upon a Broken Heart ones. But essentially, this is the third and final book to it, and I love the conclusion. Everything involving Jax, Tella and Scarlet, and even Legend and what's his name? Julian. Everything was so good. I didn't have high expectations for this when I went into it just because Legendary for me was so good. And I knew that there was going to be two perspectives, Scarlet and Tella. So I was wondering, like, how is this going to work? Because, like, they're so different and, like, it just gives different vibes. But she made it all work in the end. It was so good. What I love about Caraval is just the atmosphere Stephanie writes. And it's just so whimsical and pretty and magical. It's like the kind of Disney fairy tale story that you want to read, but it's not a retelling. It's completely new. It's her own sort of spin on her own fairy tale, which I love. It's just something I think everybody would love if you're a huge fan of romance, but not necessarily looking for a fairy tale retelling, because those are just so popular these days. But yeah, that's it. Okay, question number 5. A book that I believe deserves more hype. Right here. Right? 1 second. Come on, don't fall, don't fall, don't fall. Okay. 2 books come to mind. One is A Man Called Ove by Frederick Backman. Number 2 is 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. Let's start with Ove. So the Backman book. Honestly, I would say 4.5 out of 5 stars. It was a little slow in the beginning, but overall, I love just the arc of Ove's story. He's the Grinch, goes to be a more open-minded, like happy, I wouldn't, okay, happy is a strong word, but like open-minded, generous kind of person by the end. One of my favorite quotes that I've ever read comes from this. It was him talking about his wife, Sonia, and basically he was saying that, in terms of referencing himself, it's like, Ove was black and white, and she was all color, all the color he had. It was just such a special line, and I remember it to this day. It's just so amazing, and just the context of the story, it works so well. And I think it's relatively short, so I read it fairly quickly, and I like that. It's nothing super long. Everything was to the point. The neighbors in the story just threw so much chaos in it. I loved it, especially Parvana. She was so funny, and her lanky husband. So I just love the way everything was integrated in Ove's life and just throwing a bunch of chaos in it. So the other book, like I mentioned, 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. This book, I did not expect to like that much, but going into it, I was floored. It was amazing. For me, what this book reminds me of, it's like a crossover between It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover and People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. It's like you can take those two and make a better version of it, cross it over, and you have this book. This book just does everything right in terms of just great representation of invisible disabilities. The romance is just so well done. If you like books which have basically a more profound sense of romance, meaning it's more emotional, there's usually some kind of background history related to it. It is a little bit associated with trauma and PTSD from like generational family traumas. Like all of that's kind of intertwined in this, but it's just the way it goes about. My dream cast for the main guy, what's his name? I completely forgot. Shane. My dream cast for Shane, easily Michael B. Jordan. Like, how could you not? Honestly, I highly recommend this though. So question 6 basically asks, name a book that is either becoming a TV show or a movie. If I can pull it out. Oh my god, why did I put it on the bottom? Okay, so I decided to pick up and recommend The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I love this book from the second I picked it up. It was just incredible. Everything about it, it was basically pitched to me as like a mystery, quote-unquote thriller. I don't see the thriller in this, to be quite honest, but there's a bit of romance. There's a love triangle between the main girl, Avery, and the other two grandsons, Jameson and Grayson. Everything just works so well. I feel like for people who are new to mystery would really like this and are looking for a lighter version that's really quick to read, short chapters, and just really engaging because it's heavily plot driven, you would really love this. I devoured this very quickly. I have a whole reading vlog on the first 3 books, and it was such a great experience. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. Easily one of the best books I read last year, and literally recommend it to everyone who comes across in my path. I do wish it would have had like a nice cover. That would have made it like so much more pretty. But, you know, that is that. Go read The Inheritance Games. So the next book I want to recommend, question 7 basically, is what is a book that I have reread the most? Let me find that for you. If I can stick you out. So I'm not ashamed of this. It is A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. Yes, I have one of the original covers. In a way, I'm like feeling proud of myself just because like not many people have this OG cover because they literally released the newer edition of the whole ACOTAR series, I swear, months after I read it. So I was like, why couldn't I have waited? Honestly, I kind of like the newer covers. Like, not that this one's bad, but like it's kind of ugly, not gonna lie. But it is nice to say that I have the OG covers. Besides the point, why have I reread this story the most? Is this a bit of a story time where I actually explain my feelings about A Court of Thorns and Roses? So let's just give a slight spiel. Spoiler warning, if you have not read this book, just skip like 30 seconds, okay? So why I don't really, okay, don't like is a strong word. It's not that I don't like it. I felt like I didn't enjoy it as much as I could have. Here's why. I read the first book years ago, A Court of Thorns and Roses, loved it, was so invested in Feyre Tamlin's relationship. Going into this book, I did not expect such a drastic change, and I don't know why. I did not clearly read that key part where Feyre and Tamlin's relationship basically had a fallout ever since he's supposedly locked her in that room. I don't know why I didn't read that scene correctly. And so I didn't understand from like one point they were having an argument to the next Feyre just leaving with more and going to the night court. So I was like, what is she doing? Why is she leaving Tamlin? I was so upset. I was literally crying. So if there was a question about what book made me cry, this one, honestly, because I was so upset. Like, how could you just leave him without giving him a second? I was so upset. Anyway, I kept reading it on, and yes, it was very enjoyable, and I liked her and Rhysand's relationship to an extent, but I wish I could have read it more carefully instead of just like skimming and glossing over those scenes, because it literally destroyed my reading experience for the rest of the book. Like, through the entire time, I was like, no, Feyre, you can go back to Tamlin, he's not that bad. Rhys is a nice guy and all, but like, I was rooting for the initial one. And so I remember when I finished the book, I was sad, but I was like, still like, okay, I'm going to continue the series. And then I remember the next few times later, once I reread it, I was like, okay, that makes more sense why she left. Like, why couldn't I read it the first time? Like, I was so upset because if I just read it the first time properly, I would have had such an amazing experience instead of just drowning in my sorrow the entire time. So, word of note, read books very carefully. Don't skim. Okay, next question. What is a genre that you don't usually read from? Let me grab it. So there's generally two, but like one specifically comes to mind. The easiest is classics. I don't read classics. I don't gravitate towards it. The only reason why I picked this one up, this is Frankenstein, by the way, is because my English course required me to read it and get it. So I was like, okay. And surprise, surprise, I actually enjoyed it a lot. I did not think I would like it as much as I did, just because I never thought of classics to be a very intriguing genre. Like, I'm usually someone who's into the high epic, action-packed, sort of romancy type books. Classics don't usually deliver on that, depending on what you read. But this one was just so fresh and different from what I'm used to reading. I felt like it just gave me just a fresh perspective on things. And so I just really enjoyed the writing style and just, the whole aspect of the story. Another genre I don't usually read from ever is basically classic, nonfiction, autobiographies, all those types of things. But I did buy one called Between Two Kingdoms by Sulika Jaoud. So I was really interested in her story because I've seen a lot of booktubers read this book. I think Emma from Emma Books read it and she really enjoyed it. So basically, I think it's about this woman, Sulika, who's basically kind of writing about her life experiences and how she is kind of internalizing and facing the fact that she had to deal with cancer. I don't know her situation now, but like that's the general idea about the book. So yeah, classics, nonfiction, not the biggest thing for me, but I'm trying to get into it more. Okay, question 9, a book that deserves all the hype it gets. Easily, A Man Called Ove by Frederick Backman. Once again, let me tell you, I went into reading this book about 100 pages and I was even confused, like, how is this worth the hype as much as people like say it's like, and I didn't understand it. And then I got past like the 100 pages and I was like, wow, this is like making sense. Like, from the beginning, it's very slow because it really just sets the tone and the atmosphere of who Ove is, what his atmosphere is like, what's in his head, like what he's thinking day to day, who he interacts with, just like the atmosphere around him. That's what it's all about. But once you get past that, it really goes into describing his childhood, meeting his wife, his story with his wife, and past that, it's just like, and meeting his neighbors, everything just works so well. And just it's so hilarious because the neighbors just are so chaotic and mess everything up, and he just has to deal with it and put up with them just because they live near him anyway, so it's just really funny. But I would obviously recommend this along with a box of tissues because it is so worth the read. Okay, question number 10. What is a book that I usually recommend when asked to give a recommendation? There are 3. So 2 of them I haven't talked about yet. 1 of them I have. So again, The Inheritance Games. I love it. It's a great intro to, again, mystery and the bit of romance. And it's just very short and easy to read, very fast paced, heavily plot driven. But I feel like the romance triangle and like everything just works so well in it. and just the characters really make it funny. And the chapters are really short. So if you're someone who thrives on short chapters, you will devour this very quickly. The other one that I usually recommend is a Sabaa Tahir book. This one is An Ember in the Ashes, the first book in her like An Ember in the Ashes quartet. It is amazing. It is a high fantasy with a bit of romance, and it's set in like the Roman times, and it has a bit of the Middle Eastern influence reinforced in it. It's just such a beautifully told story. It's just a big emphasis on storytelling itself in the theme of the book. And there's also like a rebellion. She's supposed to be a slave girl slash rebel, and then he's a part of like the major oppressing army called the Masks. I forgot their actual name, but like he has a mask on anyway. But there's this whole history in the world that's just untapped, and then when they get into it, it's just so much magicalness revealed. It's just so good. The other one I always recommend people read is One Piece. We have to put a manga on this, guys. One Piece is like one of the biggest mangas of the shoujo genre out there. It is easily one of the best things I have watched, read, out there. It is just everything you want if you're looking for something with high-packed adventure, friendship, storytelling, history, you know, great characters, action-packed sequences, everything, and even like emotional bits are like really a lot, but it's so good. Obviously, it's a very long series, but it's one that is worth every book and every page of reading. If you don't want to read it, go watch the show. Read these. Question 11. Name a book that has my favorite character in it. So the first one I'm going to recommend is The Last Magician series by Lisa Maxwell. This one is amazing. It is a 4-part series, recently completed, so feel free to binge it. It is very much an urban fantasy story set majority of the time in the 1900s, like very early 1900s in New York City, Manhattan Island to be specific. And so there's a lot of that influence of Peaky Blinders, very heist, subtle romance plot in there, and it's just very plot driven. The magic system itself is very unique, but Esther Filosik, she is the star of this entire series. She is so funny. Like, she does not care what people think of her. And it's just the way she interacts with people is just so funny because she's so stubborn and very feisty at times, but it just makes for like the most interesting story, just following her around and just reading her story. So highly recommend that. Again, An Ember in the Ashes. I love Elias Viturius. He's one of the 2 perspectives in here. That's Elias right here. It's hard to see. But essentially, Elias is like my favorite person of all time in this book. There's something about his personality and just the way he carries himself. He's such a kind-hearted, strong-willed, very determined person, but he has like the nicest heart ever. And he's just like one of the best characters, like male written characters I have ever read. And I would highly recommend reading this, especially him. And then once again, how could I not forget 6 of Crows? Kanej, Inej, Kaz, Jesper. Honestly, all 6 of them are good, but specifically Kaz and Inej are just top tier characters which cannot be beat. People have issues in the fact that 17-year-old children are basically doing all these high crime activities, but honestly, same, I agree. But like, let's forget about that for a second. Like, they're just amazing. Almost done. Okay. So question number 12, name a universe / bookish world that I would like to live in. So I think the easiest one is going to be Harry Potter, like in general, just because obviously who doesn't want to live in there? Then again, I haven't been to Disney World, so I haven't been exposed to the Harry Potter world or the universe, whatever they call it. And so I really want to go there and experience the whole butterbeer and picking out your own wand and all that. Like, that would be so cool. But honestly, just like the world of Hogwarts, like, who doesn't love that? And just the magic and just flying a broom, like, that just sounds so amazing. Another world I would love to live in would be the Caraval universe by Stephanie Garber. Again, the whole mystique and magical prettiness, and it's just really pretty. And it's just also like they have mini dragons, and who doesn't love dragons? So those 2 I would love to live in. Okay, question number 13. What is a book that you thought you would hate, but I ended up loving? This one's gonna cause a bit of trouble, I know, but it is It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. Let me tell you, when I initially read this book, I loved every second of it. I devoured it pretty quickly. Now when I think about it, based on what everyone's saying and like really processing it, I can understand why there's so much commotion about this book in particular. On the other side, like, I am not a person for the whole cancel culture thing, but I understand where people are coming from when it comes to this. But you know, this is a question that I'm being asked about a book that I thought I would hate, but I actually loved. So I'm answering it with this book because I really did love this book. Even though I came into it knowing a lot of people didn't necessarily like it. Another book I didn't think I would like at all was Frankenstein, a classic. Who would have thought I would love a classic? Honestly, I don't think I would naturally say classics are my favorite genre, considering this is like the only classic I've read, but I am more open to reading it because this was such a hit for me, and it just gave me such a refreshing perspective and really cleared me of my reading slump. Okay, the next question is name a book that made me cry. Honestly, what book hasn't made me cry? I literally cry at everything. It's kind of funny. The one that comes to mind first is, not many people are gonna like this again, it's The Crown of Gilded Bones by Jennifer L. Armentrout, the third book in the whole From Blood and Ash world. I read this a while ago, so it's been a while since I've like touched it, but there was a certain scene near the beginning little third of it where it was kind of emotional, considering, like, I'm not gonna spoil it, but like, it was pretty emotional. Like, something happened to Poppy that made everyone upset, and it changed the course of her personality and like trajectory for the rest of the series, and it's just different, but it was really sad at the time. The other one, I mean, by no surprise, Crooked Kingdom. If you've read the last little bit of this book, do I need to explain? If you haven't, go read this yourself, and then I wouldn't have to explain to you. The other one, I mean, like A Court of Mist and Fury, Wings and Ruin, like all of that. Again, I was really upset at the time, but it was also emotional and really entertaining, but that's also my third option. Okay, final question. What is a book that I wish I could read for the first time? Yes, I'm gonna say it again. A Court of Mist and Fury. Let me grab it because I feel like that's necessary. Okay. A Court of Mist and Fury by Miss Sarah J. Maas. So, why do I wish I could reread this? Again, if you listened to my whole spiel about it earlier, if I could have read this more carefully, my reading experience overall would have been so much more enjoyable. I mean, there is a bit of toxic traits in there and a bit of hypocrisy going on in the story, but that's a talk for another day. Overall, I do wish I could reread this just to say I would have liked it better, but can't really change that now, can I? So that essentially concludes my book recommendations tag. If you like this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps me out. I'm almost there to the 1,000 subscriber mark. Again, sorry for posting late. I'm really bad at consistency here, but I'm getting better at it, I promise. So again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Peace.